From all available evidence, no black man had ever set foot in this tiny Swiss village before I came. I was told before arriving that I would probably be a sight for the village. I took this to mean that people of my complexion were rarely seen in Switzerland, and also that city people are always something of a sight outside of the city. It did not occur to me, possibly because I am an American, that there could be people anywhere who had never seen a Negro. The landscape is absolutely forbidding, mountains towering on all four sides, ice and snow as far as the eye can reach. In this white wilderness, men and women and children move all day, carrying washing, wood, buckets of milk or water, sometimes skiing on Sunday afternoons. All week long, boys and young men are to be seen shoveling snow off the rooftops or dragging wood down from the forest in sleds. Wherever I passed, the first summer I was here, the wind passed with me, of astonishment, curiosity, amusement, and outrage. That first summer I stayed 2 weeks and never intended to return, but I did return in the winter to work. Now it is winter again, and I am here again. Everyone in the village knows my name, though they scarcely ever use it, knows that I come from America, though this apparently they will never really believe. Black men come from Africa. And everyone knows that I am the friend of the son of a woman who was born here, and that I am staying in their chalet. But I remain as much a stranger today as I was the first day I arrived, and the children shout nigger, 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 as I walk along the streets. It must be admitted that in the beginning, I was far too shocked to have any real reaction. Insofar as I reacted at all, I reacted by trying to be pleasant. It being a great part of the American Negro's education, long before he goes to school, that he must make people like him. This smile and the world smiles with you routine worked about as well in this situation as it had in the situation for which it was designed, which is to say that it did not work at all. No one, after all, can be liked whose human weight and complexity cannot be or has not been admitted. My smile was simply another unheard of phenomenon which allowed them to see my teeth. They did not really see my smile, and I began to think that should I take this snarling, no one would notice any difference. All of the physical characteristics of the Negro, which would cause me in America a very different and almost forgotten pain, were nothing less than miraculous or infernal in the eyes of the village people. Some thought my hair had the color of tar, texture of cotton, or the texture of wire, and it was jocularly suggested that I might let it all grow long and make myself a winter coat. If I sat in the sun for more than 5 minutes, some daring creature was certain to come along and gingerly put his fingers on my hair, as though he were afraid of an electric shock, or put his hand on my hand, astonished that the color did not rub off. In all of this, in which it must be conceded, there was a charm of genuine wonder, and in which there was certainly no element of intentional unkindness. There was yet no suggestion that I was human. I was simply living wonder. I knew that they did not mean to be unkind, and I know it now. It is necessary, nevertheless, for me to repeat this to myself each time that I walk out of the chalet. The children of Chattanooga have no way of knowing the echoes this sound raises in me. Just the same, there are days when I don't have any heart to stop and play with them. When I mutter to myself, exactly as I muttered in the streets of a city these children had never seen when I was no bigger than they are now. Your mother was a nigger. Joyce is right about history being a nightmare, but it may be the nightmare from which no one can awaken. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. There is a custom in the village, I am told it is repeated in many villages, of buying African natives for the purpose of converting them to Christianity. There stands in the church all year round a small box with a slot for money, decorated with a black figurine, and into this box the villagers drop their francs. During the carnival which precedes Lent, 2 village children have their faces blackened, out of which bloodless darkness their blue eyes shine like ice, and fantastic horsehair wigs are placed on their blonde heads. Thus disguised, they solicit among the villagers for money for the missionaries in Africa. Between the box and the church and the blackened children, the village bought last year 6 or 8 African natives. It was the bistro owner's wife who told me this with tremendous pride, and I was very careful to express my astonishment and my pleasure that the village was so solicitous concerning the souls of black folk. And she, the bistro owner's wife, beamed with a pleasure much more sincere than mine, and seemed to feel that I might now breathe more easily concerning the souls of at least 6 of my kinsmen. I thought of white men arriving for the first time in an African village, strangers there, as I am a stranger here, and tried to imagine the astounded populace touching their hair and marveling at the color of their skin. But there is a great difference between being the first white man to be seen by Africans and being the first black man to be seen by whites. The white man takes the astonishment as tribute, for he arrives to conquer and to convert the natives whose inferiority in relation to himself is not even to be questioned. Whereas I, without a thought of conquest, arrive among a people whose culture controls me, has even in a sense created me, people who have cost me more in anguish and rage than they will ever know, who yet do not even know of my existence. The astonishment with which I might have greeted them, should they have arrived in my African village a few hundred years ago, would have rejoiced their hearts. But the astonishment with which they greet me today can only poison mine. And this is so, despite everything I may do to feel differently, despite my friendly conversations with the bistro owner's wife, despite their 3-year-old son, who has at last become my friend, despite the salut and bonsoirs which I exchange with people as I walk, despite the fact that I know that no individual can be taken to task for what history is doing or has done. I say that the culture of these people controls me, but they can scarcely be held responsible for European culture. America comes out of Europe, but these people have never seen America, nor have most of them seen more of Europe than the hamlet at the foot of their mountain. And yet, they move with an authority which I shall never have, and they consider me, quite rightly, not only as a stranger, but as a suspect latecomer, bearing no credentials to everything they have, however unconsciously, inherited. These people cannot be, from the point of view of power, strangers anywhere in the world. They have made the modern world, in effect, even if they do not know it. The most literate among them is related in a way that I am not to Dante, Shakespeare, Michelangelo. The cathedral at Chartres says something to them which it cannot say to me. Out of their hymns and dances come Beethoven and Bach. Go back a few centuries and they are in their full glory. But I am in Africa, watching the conquerors arrive. The rage of the disesteemed is personally fruitless, but it is also absolutely inevitable. This rage, so generally discounted and so little understood, even among the people whose daily bread it is one of the things that makes history. This is a fact which most white people, having never felt this rage and being unable to imagine it, quite fail to understand. Also, rage cannot be hidden. It can only be dissembled. And this dissembling deludes the thoughtless and strengthens rage and adds to rage contempt. There are no doubt as many ways of coping with the resulting complex of tensions as there are black men in the world, but no black man anywhere can hope ever to be entirely liberated from this internal warfare, rage, dissembling, and contempt, having inevitably accompanied his first realization of the power of white men. There is, I should hazard, an instantaneous necessity to be divorced from this so visibly unsaved stranger, in whose heart, moreover, one cannot guess what dreams of vengeance are being nourished. And at the same time, there are few things on earth more attractive than the idea of the unspeakable liberty which is allowed the unredeemed. When, beneath the black mask, a human being begins to make himself felt, one cannot escape a certain awful wonder as to what kind of human being it is. What one's imagination makes of other people is dictated, obviously, by the laws of one's own personality. And it is one of the ironies of black-white relations that by means of what the white man imagines the black man to be, the black man is enabled to know who the white man is. I have said, for example, that I am as much a stranger in this village today as I was the first summer I arrived, but this is not quite true. The villagers wonder less about the texture of my hair than they did then, and wonder rather more about me. And the fact that their wonder now exists on another level is reflected in their attitudes and in their eyes. There are the children who make those delightful, hilarious, sometimes astonishingly grave overtures of friendship in the unpredictable fashion of children. Other children, having been taught that the devil is a black man, scream in genuine anguish as I approach. Some of the men drink with me and suggest that I learn how to ski, partly, I gather, because they cannot imagine what I would look like on skis and want to know if I am married and ask questions about my métier. But some of the men have accused Le Sale Negre, behind my back, of stealing wood, and there is already in the eyes of some of them that peculiar intent, paranoid malevolence, which one sometimes surprises in the eyes of American white men when, out walking with their Sunday girl, they see a Negro male approach. There is a dreadful abyss between the streets of this village and the streets of the city in which I was born, between the children who shout nigger today and those who shouted nigger yesterday. The abyss is experience, the American experience. The syllable hurled behind me today expresses above all wonder. I am a stranger here. For this village brings home to me this fact, that there was a day, and not really a very distant day, when Americans were scarcely Americans at all, but discontented Europeans facing a great unconquered continent and strolling, say, into a marketplace and seeing black men for the first time. The shock this spectacle afforded them is suggested to me, surely, by the speed with which they decided that these black men were not really men, but cattle. I suppose it's true that the necessity on the part of the settlers of the New World to reconcile their moral assumptions with the fact and the necessity of slavery enhanced immensely the charm of this idea. And it is also true that this idea reveals with a truly American bluntness the attitude which to varying degrees all masters have had toward all slaves. The history or the destiny of the captive black man who became the American Negro slave is different from that of all other black men in that his past was taken from him totally and almost literally at one blow. One wonders what on earth the first slave found to say to the first dark child he bore. For the history of the American Negro is unique also in this, that the question of his humanity and of his rights, therefore, as a human being, became a burning one for several generations of Americans, so burning a question that was one of those used ultimately to divide the nation. It is out of this argument that the venom of the epithet nigger is derived. It is an argument which Europe has never had, and therefore Europe quite sincerely fails to understand how and why the argument arose in the first place, why its effects are always so unforeseeable and frequently so disastrous, and why it refuses until today to be entirely settled. But Europe's black possessions were never on the mainland. They were in the colonies, and at that distance they represented no threat whatever to European identity. If the presence, the actuality, the fact of these colonies represented any problem whatever for the European conscience. It was a problem which remained comfortingly abstract. In effect, the black man, as a man, did not exist for Europe. But now, in the colonies, with the rage of those black people and their determination to make themselves free, the foundations, the moral, economic, and social foundations of Europe are being menaced. And when this happens in a society, in a country, in any culture, the person's idea of himself is also menaced. The idea of white supremacy rests on the notion that white men are the creators of civilization. Therefore, it was impossible for Americans to accept the black man as one of themselves, for to do so was to jeopardize their status as white people, but not to accept him as a man like themselves, forced them to deny to themselves this black man's human reality, his weight, his complexity, and this effort to deny something which is overwhelmingly undeniable has led Americans into rationalizations and into attitudes and even to a way of life so fantastic that it's very close sometimes to the pathological. At the root of the American Negro problem, as it is called, one finds the necessity on the part of white people to find a way of living with black people in order to find a way of living with themselves. And the history of this problem can be reduced to those means used by Americans to come to terms with this necessity. And the history is not very pretty. It ranges from the most blatant terrorism to the world-renowned lynchings, fantastic histories of court battles. Most of the Negro leaders who are really leaders are not very well known in America, and of course not at all known here, because they're to be found in jails and in chain gangs, and of course in ditches and in graves. Now, there is a kind of technical legal acceptance which is beginning to take place in America, which has not in the least yet ameliorated the problem. Someone said about this spectacle that the Negro in America is a form of insanity which overtakes white men. The cathedral at Chartres, I have said, says something to the people of this village which it cannot say to me. But it is important to understand that this cathedral says something to me which it cannot say to them. Perhaps they are struck by the power of the spires, the glory of the windows, but they have known God after all, longer than I have known him, and in a different way, and I am terrified by the slippery bottomless well to be found in the crypt, down which heretics were hurled to death, and by the obscene, inescapable gargoyles jutting out of the stone and seeming to say that God and the devil can never be divorced. I doubt that the villagers think of the devil when they face a cathedral, because they have never been identified with the devil. But I must accept the status which myth, if nothing else, gives me in the West before I can hope to change the myth. But if the Negro in America has achieved his identity by virtue of the absoluteness of his estrangement from his past, American white men still nourish the illusion that there is some means of reconquering the European innocence, of returning to a state in which black men do not exist. This is one of the greatest errors Americans can make. The battle, the identity that they fought so hard to protect has, by virtue of that battle, undergone a change. And they are now as unlike any white people in the world as it is possible to be. I don't think, for example, that it is too much to say that vision of the world which most Americans until today guard, that vision of the world which describes nations, people, political issues in glaring black and white, I think this vision of the world owes a great deal to the battle waged by Americans to maintain between themselves and black men a human separation which could not be bridged. It is only now, beginning to be borne in on us, that this vision of the world is totally inexact and perfectly useless, that the world, in short, is not like that. The time has come to recognize that the interracial drama being acted out on the American continent has not only created a new black man, it has created a new white man too. No road whatever will lead Americans back to the simplicity of this European village where white men still have the luxury of looking on me as a stranger. I'm not really a stranger any longer for any American alive. One of the things that distinguishes Americans from all other people is no other people have ever been so intimately, so profoundly involved in the lives of black people, and vice versa. This fact faced with all its implications, it can be seen that the history of the American Negro problem is not merely shameful, it is also something of an achievement. But for the Europeans, it is a kind of warning. We have not resolved the problem in our country, and it is only just beginning to be a problem for you. But it is precisely for this reason that the black-white history, this long and painful black-white history, may prove to be of the most indispensable value for us in the world we face today. This world is white no longer, and it will never be white again.